Prosecutor says the Russian man created the Benghazi virus in 2005 that was used to gain access to NASA computers last summer. With IRN, you
Happy, healthy, and wealthy. Follow the American dream. On South Florida's AM 1470 WNN.
Here's some great news from Tom Trento, host of the daily WNN Trento Vision Show. Due to the unparalleled success of the Trento Vision Show, you now have an amazing opportunity to advertise on the Trento Vision Show. If you want more information about this excellent opportunity for your business, please contact Tom Trento at 561-319-5533. Or you can email him, tom@trentovision.tv. The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. Welcome to Trento Vision, where bad ideas get pulverized and the truth will set you free. Trento Vision is hosted by Tom Trento. Tom can be reached at 561-319-5533 or tom@trentovision.tv. Listen and watch every weekday from 3 to 6 p.m. on AM 1470 WNN and trentovision.tv. Now, let's get a peek at Tom's view of the world. Here's Tom Trento.
Hello, hello, hello. How you doing? I am not Tom Trento. I am not Tom Trento. I am J. Mark Campbell, and we have to the other side of us CJ. Say hi, CJ.
Hi, CJ.
And we have Invisible Mike off to the side.
How's it going?
Hey, there we go. We have the triad here. Tom is on a secret covert mission.
Yes, where in the world is Tom Trento?
He is not with us.
He won't tell.
He won't tell.
He won't tell. Don't ask, he won't tell.
Don't ask, he won't tell. Oh, and we are WNN 1470. If you want to call into the show, 888-565-1470. And you can get us on iHeartRadio by downloading the iHeartRadio app and typing in WNN. You can hear us in crystal clear digital.
You're going so fast, I can't absorb it all. You have to
talk slowly. All right. How can we get
How can we get iHeartRadio on our smartphones, Mark?
We download iHeartRadio, and we actually type in WNN, and you can hear us in clear, crystal clear digital audio anywhere in the world.
And it's so easy.
It is. It's actually really cool. It's a really cool thing. And you can also see us at www.trentovision.tv.
That's right. And what will they see?
And they will see
if
us
they go to trentovision.tv.
They won't see Tom because he's not here.
They won't see Tom because he's not here. They'll just see us, and they'll see Blake in the background.
That's
in the
right.
booth.
That's right. And, and they'll see they'll see Claire Lopez in a minute.
And they'll see Claire Lopez in a minute. And you have something special for Claire, don't you?
We have something special for Claire. If you're watching on trentovision.tv, I have something special for you.
I have something special for you.
It's funny.
I knew it. Our buddy. Our buddy. You brought him, our mascot.
Our mascot. I got to tell you a funny story about this one, Claire. Yeah. We were over down in Orlando, Florida, and we're at the conference, the Islam conference.
You have to tell the radio listeners what it is that you're dangling.
I'm going to give me a lead in. And what I have here, I have in my hand a dead chicken, which is kind of our mascot, which travels with us all over the world.
Yeah.
And Claire's been surprised by the mascot many of times.
Yeah, because you guys are so frisky when you travel.
She finds it in her bed. She finds it in her luggage. She finds it at her doorstep. And she screams every time she sees it. Ah!
It's the chicken.
Now, here's the funny story. Karen Vaughn. You know Karen Vaughn. She's the mother of Aaron Vaughn, and she's with who's a SEAL Team 6 member.
Yeah.
And they have a whole foundation. So we travel with Karen, quite frequently.
Karen and her husband, Billy.
Billy. Yeah. And great people. Wonderful people. And we're down at a conference in Orlando, and we're a bunch of Christians got together. And she says, "Hey, Mark, do you have a..." She was after a book, right? She goes, yeah, it's right in front part of my pocket there, right? And she reaches in there and she goes, and she reaches in and she grabs the chicken.
Grabs the chicken.
And she goes, ah, what's that?
And did you give her some hand sanitizer?
Yeah, and she was like, Princess, well, just go ahead and get it. And she goes, no, there's a chicken in there. So Karen Vaughn got chicken like you did, Karen.
She got chicken. Okay, that is. She got the squishy chicken.
So we're talking about
what we've been talking about today so far, leading up to Hillary Clinton's Senate and House hearings on Benghazi,
Right.
as we were doing the follow-up on the Israeli election.
Yeah.
Of course, the coalition government is not formed and rubber stamped yet.
But it's looking like good news overall for us in Israel. I mean, our side, not for the Obama administration, but it's looking like it's going to be some type of opposition, at least a roadblock, if you will, to Obama, which is very good news.
Yeah. So I want, even though that we didn't tell Claire that we were going to ask her about that, maybe before we get into Benghazi, I kind of want to get.
Claire's one of those.
Because Claire knows everything.
Claire's one of those brain people. You just like. Okay, one of those scary brain people, and you're just like,
well, no, she's not scary.
No, she's not scary.
She's not scary if you're on her side.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're not on Claire's side, you should be very afraid.
Well, we're out in California, and in one of the stories I've told earlier on her is like, one of these imams, supposed imams, comes and says, well, if you actually knew what it was in Farsi and everything, and she starts rattling off Farsi to the guy, and it's like. And the guy just like, oops, don't.
Oops, maybe not.
And speaking of the whole, of what's going on with Israel and Clinton is, for the transition here is that, we're looking at Hillary Clinton right now, and, it's just amazing what she does. She reminds me of a Bart Simpson, character. There's his quote where he says, I didn't do it. You didn't see me do it. You can't prove anything. Yet he's totally caught red-handed doing whatever he's doing.
Right.
And that's kind of what's going on.
Well, she learned that from her husband, right?
Yeah, exactly.
She learned that from her husband.
So, Claire, let's get a little background on Claire.
Yeah, a little background on Claire. You're a fellow with the Center for Security Policy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're retired from the CIA.
20 years.
20
Veteran
years.
of the CIA.
Yeah.
And you traveled all over the world.
Yes.
For the CIA, so you know some stuff. And how many languages do you speak?
Well, they're getting a little rusty now, but a few.
Well,
okay, so you're not going to even tell anybody now how many, so you can trap them at a cocktail party, or if you're overhearing people in the airport.
Let's just say that I'm focusing right now on my Farsi and trying to improve that with lessons with a wonderful tutor that I have.
Yeah, I need to bone up on my Farsi
Farsi is
too.
the new Russian.
What you used to be, what are your other languages?
It used to be you had to know Russian, and now you have to know Arabic and Farsi, right?
I actually tried to learn Arabic first. I started studying Arabic, and it's pretty hard. But then when my focus turned to Iran, I dropped the Arabic and switched to Farsi, and I've been at it ever since.
Wow.
And that's amazing.
So
I got a question for you, Claire, right off the top. We had a caller call in earlier, and he had actually a perfect comment. He goes, yeah, I'm Hillary Clinton. I take full responsibility for my actions, yet it's everyone else's fault. Is that kind of what you're seeing, in the,
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I think your caller pretty well nailed it.
Yeah.
The hearings are still going on as we speak, even now on the House side.
Right.
But in question after question, as I've been watching these through the day, the Secretary's answer to questions was, well, the ARB, the ARB as they call it, fixed responsibility at the Assistant Secretary of State level, so conveniently just below the Secretary of State level.
Now, that's the accountability.
She says, I take full responsibility, and yet she takes none. She puts it all on her subordinates.
Right.
Who don't have to bear any responsibility either, actually, because even though they're on administrative leave, whatever that means,
right.
To to the best of our knowledge so far, nobody has actually, been docked pay, lost their position, lost rank or grade, and suffered any consequences whatsoever.
Right. Claire, the ARB, that's the Accountability Review Board?
That's right.
Okay, so the State Department did its own internal investigation after the Benghazi incident, in which they did not actually interview the Secretary of State, and then they published their findings and said that's our full and complete report. And people were put on administrative leave, which means we don't want you talking to anybody. Here's a paid holiday. Go away until the next administration is sworn in, and then we'll bring you in the back door. Is that pretty much it?
Pretty much sums things up. I will add that the individual they chose to lead, to head up that Accountability Review Board, the ARB, was Ambassador Thomas Pickering. And for anyone who knows about Ambassador Pickering, he has a long association with individuals and groups like NIAC, the National Iranian American Council, known to be very close to the Tehran regime in Iran.
Right. And that was in your, you did a big expose on them in that big Iran white paper a few years ago, didn't you?
Well, the Center for Security Policy, where, as you say, I'm a fellow now, in February 2009 was kind enough to publish the paper called The Iran Lobby.
Right.
And it really needs an update by now, and I've been meaning to do an update on it. But it's a report about the various different, again, individuals and groups. These are ambassadors, they are non-profit organizations, they are think tanks, retired individuals, from State Department, from the oil industry, from different places. Journalists are affiliated, who all are linked in various ways, including interlocking musical chairs, boards of advisors, and boards of directors of some of these organizations. They share some of the same funding sources like Plowshares and Tide and others like those. And they share an agenda, and that's the best way to know them, except for their mutual appearances on one another's websites and panels.
Right.
But the agenda is pretty obvious and pretty clear. It's don't hold Tehran to account for its nuclear weapons program, support of terrorism, or appalling human rights record. Lessen the sanctions, ease the sanctions, open direct negotiations without preconditions, et cetera, et cetera. And this is their mantra. Well, this is Thomas Pickering, who was chosen to head the Accountability Review Board for the State Department on Benghazi.
Great.
Wow.
Now the Clinton administration, I mean Hillary and Bill included, I will have to add, has a long history of dealing with some pretty savory Islamic groups, in the past. Just like Benghazi wasn't just didn't appear on the radar as the first time. I mean, they actually go back with the Fethullah Gulen and a whole bunch of other associations back to the Somalian, bringing in Somalis into Tennessee and have what have you. Is that correct, Claire?
Well, what you're describing is a long pattern of United States administrations, and this shouldn't be a partisan thing. This is not about Republicans or Democrats, because they're both guilty. They're all guilty of misunderstanding. Let's put it that way: misunderstanding the threat of Islamic jihad and Sharia that's coming at us. This goes way back. I mean, we could talk about the son-in-law of Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, in the Oval Office, meeting with a delegation of Muslim brothers with then President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1953. So, I mean, this goes that far back. But if you want to talk about the Clinton administration, the period when Al-Qaeda was forming and becoming stronger, becoming identifiable, and Osama bin Laden was identified as a terrorist operative. But it was also the period of time when Al-Qaeda joined forces with Iran, under the auspices of their host in Khartoum, Sudan, President Bashir. Omar al-Bashir in Sudan brought them together. That was completely missed by the Clinton administration. I don't know if it was, Monica, the pizza parties, or what, but they weren't paying attention.
No.
And so they missed the Iranian Al Qaeda, joint responsibility for Khobar Towers in 1996, and then of course the embassy bombings in East Africa in 1998, the USS Cole in 2000.
Yeah.
I mean, all of these were lead-ups to what would happen on 9/11, and yet, they missed all of it. They missed all the clues. They were following bin Laden, but they didn't understand that his declarations of war in 96 and 98 meant war, meant jihad against America.
Right.
So they missed all that, and they're continuing to miss it to this day, what it really means. Worse than ever now, of course, in this administration, which maybe they don't miss it. They may not miss it. They have deliberately chosen to ally themselves with it, and that brings us back to Libya, of course.
Yeah, let's fast
what
forward.
we're doing in Libya.
Exactly. That's the point I think that Mark is leading up to is, even though Hillary's been Secretary of State for 4 years, and of course she was a senator before that, she goes back a long
way
at the top of having access to American foreign policy information. So for her to turn around and say, I didn't think about that, I wasn't looking at it, or I didn't know how it worked,
it makes no sense.
That's just absolute nonsense, because she's been as close to the center of power in this country as you can get since the early 90s.
Yeah, it doesn't wash. Just as you say, CJ, you're absolutely right. She had access to information about exactly who were these characters and players and militias in Libya for a long time. As a matter of fact, if you want to talk about Ambassador Stevens, way before he became ambassador, much earlier, he was a Foreign Service career diplomat serving in different places around the Middle East. But earlier, while Gaddafi was still in power, and we know this thanks to the dogged investigative work by Diana West.
Yeah.
Yes.
Christopher Stevens, was petitioning the Gaddafi regime for the release from prison of some of these same dirtballs, Al-Qaeda militia leaders that later would be involved in killing him. Let's name one of those, Abu Sufyan bin Kumu. Abu Sufyan bin Kumu is the head of the Derna, Libya branch of Ansar al-Sharia. And of course, Ansar al-Sharia, the Al-Qaeda militia that was responsible for the attack on our Benghazi mission, September the 11th. He actually petitioned, he asked the Gaddafi government about it after his welfare. Was he being taken care of in prison? Could they get him out? What in the world were they thinking? Not just Christopher Stevens himself, who seems to have been incredibly naive, but his superiors who let him go on and on like this to the point where he endangered his own life and ultimately lost it in service to the United States, absolutely. But they have found somebody a little more knowledgeable?
That was so amazing to me in the first place when I watched the hearings this morning is pretty much nobody asked Hillary Clinton, what were we doing in Benghazi to begin with? Everything centered around...
Especially after every other country in the world left, bailed, everything.
Why were we in Benghazi? What were we doing there? Why was Ambassador Stevens sent to Benghazi? What was the American presence in Benghazi for? And that was not covered at all.
Well, actually, it was by one senator... and that was Senator Rand Paul, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, and he got hammered in the meet. Oh, he's just such a hate. But yeah, go ahead, Claire.
But you're getting to a very good point, and let me mention my frustration with today's hearings, as much as I've been able to watch of them. Mm-hmm. Far too many, in my humble opinion, far too many of the representatives have used their brief 5 minutes, because that's all each one gets is 5 minutes. And they're using their 5 minutes for grandstanding, to make their
Yeah.
own statements instead of grilling the secretary
Yeah.
with
Right.
question and peppering her with these questions and following up when she doesn't answer them satisfactorily.
No, they're
So-
fawning on her and congratulating her for her
Service.
service.
Well, to get back to what your question actually is, and the question I think it was either Senator Ron Jones, who also was very direct with her.
Johnson?
His question
Or-
was more to the point of the cover-up and the video.
Yeah.
And Senator Rand Paul was the one, yes, who asked about what were we doing there in the first place. Well,
Yeah.
what we were doing there in the first place, of course, was assisting Al-Qaeda to overthrow Gaddafi.
Right.
Exactly.
The uprising, of course, against Gaddafi began in February 2011, shortly after a couple of the other ones. Tunisia went first in December 2010, and then Egypt broke out in January. February, Libya follows. By the way, the Libyan revolution broke out on which date? February 17.
Right.
February 17 is the
That's a
name
significant
of the
date.
Martyrs
Yeah.
Brigade
Yeah.
that our Benghazi base officials chose to defend.
Just a coincidence.
Yeah, well,
This
that's
is
okay,
just
because we
coincidence.
don't
here.
defend our embassies
What are
on
these people
September
thinking?
11th. Yeah.
But in any case, so the revolt breaks out in 2011 February, and at that time Christopher Stevens was not ambassador yet. He was then named in March that year to be the official liaison to Al-Qaeda in Libya. Of course, that's not the way they would put it,
Right.
but he was the official U.S. government liaison to the Libyan opposition, right?
Right.
And in that period of time, when it looked at the very beginning as though the revolt were faltering, and remember when we heard that the United States and NATO just had to intervene. We just had to intervene because the poor civilian population of Benghazi was going to get murdered.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
now we know what Benghazi was really about. Benghazi was the heart and the soul of the revolution. It's the place where the revolution began. It's the place where the revolution took hold. That is their base of operations. The Al-Qaeda militias that Christopher Stevens knew and worked with so well for so many years. If Benghazi had fallen at that point in the revolt, it is it's possible that the revolt itself in Libya could have failed, and that Gaddafi might have remained in power. That's the reason we intervened, not to save the population of Benghazi,
Of course
to
not.
save the revolt, to save the Al-Qaeda revolt. And so that's when Christopher Stevens became the liaison to these groups, and he worked very closely with people like Bin Kumu or Abdul Hakim Belhaj, head of the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. They're all Al-Qaeda. They knew they were Al-Qaeda. They knew who they were working with. They chose to work with Al-Qaeda to arm them, fund them, train them, give them intelligence, Al-Qaeda, in order to overthrow Gaddafi, who had been actually helping us to suppress Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb up to that point.
Okay,
And that's the reason
Claire,
Islamic-
can I ask you a really stupid question here?
No stupid question. Sure, but go
Okay.
ahead.
Why is it good U.S. foreign policy to instigate and aid a revolution in Libya or Syria or anywhere else for that matter, or Egypt, that's going to put our enemies in power and weaken us around the world?
It's absurd, isn't it? But
Isn't
that's
that the
exactly what we're
opposite of
doing.
what U.S. policy should be in the first place?
U.S. policy has joined the Islamic Jihad on the side of the jihadis.
And to amplify that,
Before you, yeah, I'm sorry, Mark, I'm going to cut you off for 1 second, because before you say that, I have to tell you, one quote that came out of Hillary's testimony, she did make an admission. We now face a spreading jihadist threat. Okay, that's the first time I've ever heard anybody in the administration admit that there is a spreading jihadist threat.
before it's just taken care of.
But I guess it's because you're on their side.
right.
Well, that is exactly the very predictable predictable result of what we did, we and our allies, our NATO allies, did in Libya. We took the lid off of Al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way. I mean, look now, in Tunisia, in Libya, and in Egypt, they are all dominated politically by the Muslim Brotherhood. Al-Qaeda did the fighting in Libya.
Right.
The Muslim Brotherhood
Takes over the
has
government, or
succeeded in taking
yeah.
the predominant power. And they are increasing their strength in all of these places, consolidating that power now.
Well, when you have the OIC nations all getting behind the toppling of Gaddafi, you have to be going, whoa, what do you, these guys are on our side? Oh my, they're just.
Well, I mean, and here we go to how did United States policy come to flip 180 degrees from fighting Islamic Jihad against Islamic Jihad now to joining it and being part of it? Well, and the results, we do see the lid coming off in Libya, and the weapons go, Gaddafi's stockpiles of weapons, bought and paid for in large part by Qatar. We can talk about them a little bit later, but go flowing in all directions, including to West Africa, where now those Al-Qaeda militias and weapons are now threatening the nation of Mali.
Yeah.
But how did our policy flip like this? Well, this is where we have to come back home again and look at the influence inside of our own government. The influence of whom? The Muslim Brotherhood,
Right.
which has been infiltrating our government and society. Since World War II, I talked about President Eisenhower in the Oval Office back in the 50s. Well, it's been going on that long. But now the point of infiltration has come to a point where you could really call it institutionalization of the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States national security leadership of this country.
Well,
and you had, certain very courageous congressional leaders, Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota,
Right.
Representative Trent Franks of Arizona, Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas, Representative Tom Rooney of Florida, and Representative Lynn Westmoreland of Georgia, I believe, wrote letters this past summer, June 2012, to the Inspectors General of the Department of Homeland Security, Justice, State, Defense, and the ODNI, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, asking them to look into Muslim Brotherhood influence in our government. They were roundly criticized, including by their own people, their own party.
John McCain.
John McCain
and
was big,
John McCain, completely clueless about what is going on, to the point that the investigation never took place. Our policy is what it is, and we have to ask, how did it get that way?
And it goes to the highest of levels. Is like the paper was, saying, it's at all levels. And one of the instances that got brought up was Abedin, which was, Hillary's, chief aide, and which goes all the way, and Abedin goes all the way back. The reason I was trying to set up the precedent. I mean, this didn't start at Benghazi or even during the Obama administration. This goes all the way back to when Abedin was just a lowly clerk, with Hillary.
Well, she began as an intern.
Yeah.
Abedin is the deputy chief of staff for Secretary of State Clinton, and has been since January 2009 when this administration came into office.
Right.
But prior to that, she began her Washington career, you might say, after growing up in Saudi Arabia with a family who is completely Muslim Brotherhood, father, mother, brother, sister.
No doubt about it.
All Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah, she's
close
mobbed up, as
ties
they
their
say.
entire lives with the Muslim Brotherhood and with the highest levels of the Saudi royal family and the nexus between the Saudi royal family and Al-Qaeda funding. The individual that best represents that, I think, is a senior Saudi and a very senior Muslim Brotherhood figure by the name of Omar Abdullah Nassif.
Okay.
Omar Abdullah Nassif has been the president of Abdulaziz University. He's been at the head of Muslim Brotherhood organizations like the Muslim World Youth. He has been the head of many senior Muslim Brotherhood organizations. He also is the founder of something called the Rabita Trust. Rabita Trust, you may recall from the investigation after 9/11, was a funding mechanism for Al-Qaeda. He's also very close to the royal family, and he has served as a kind of a godfather, maybe, if you will.
I'm sorry to stop laughing.
It's so
laughing.
ridiculous. It's comical.
It's so absurd.
Okay? This is who the Abedin family
This is who they are, but let's make sure we get a good background check on me if I try to buy a gun because I'm a threat to national security.
It's amazing. It's mind-boggling. So Huma Abedin, young student, after growing up in Saudi Arabia, where her parents were educators, actually, she comes to the United States to attend George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and there, in 1997, we find her name on the masthead of the executive board of the Muslim Student Association, the first Muslim Brotherhood front organization ever to be founded in the United States back in the 60s, now with representation on over 600 and more campuses across North America. She is an officer of the Muslim Brotherhood organization, MSA, Muslim Student Association.
What are the colors?
In that year when she is serving on that board of a Muslim Brotherhood organization, that she receives an internship at the White House. Even saying this sounds absurd
This is
to me.
insane.
So in she comes, and quickly she begins working in the White House, and that is during, of course, the Clinton administration, the Bill Clinton administration, when First Lady Hillary Clinton first got to know Huma Abedin. After that, of course, comes other appointments, ultimately leading up to where she is now Deputy Chief of Staff for Secretary of State Clinton. But the point is here, it is during this very period of time when Huma Abedin is gathering and growing in influence within the State Department with Secretary of State Clinton and other Muslim Brotherhood identifiable associated affiliated figures are also making inroads into other parts of the government, including the White House, Department of Homeland Security, and National Security Council, that we see the change in policy.
And that's a great point, Claire. And it's a really great point, Claire, is because, we focus, it seems like too much almost, on these people who are in these positions of power and not look what these positions of power actually do. And if you are the chief of, the right-hand person of the Secretary of State or the Vice President or the President or whoever, you wield so much power inside the Beltway and abroad that you pretty much say, hey, we want to let this person in over here. Oh, okay, you're the right-hand chief of this person. We're going to let him in. And also, this is how, Abdul Rahman Al-Amoudi gets to the president. There's a whole host of people below these people that have to get these people to the person in power. You just don't walk up to the president of the United States and say, listen, I want to be your Islamic advisor. There has to be a whole process of which that happens to get to that point. And in the reverse case with Hillary Clinton, there's a person right there we know is an absolute 100% Muslim brother operator.
She's
inside.
A Muslim brother sister, man.
Yeah, she is. I mean, she is so John Gotti'd up. It is pathetic.
Well, let me ask you this then.
My point is getting down to the end is that whole aura which she goes out to is very far and wide and has many tentacles which we don't even see. And that's the whole
Well, let me
issue.
bring it back to the hearings and ask you this, Claire. I'm not an expert in anything. I wasn't in the CIA for 20 years. I didn't serve in the military like Mark did. I'm just your average person who self-studies, watches the news, pays attention to what's going on, reads some history, and can put A and B together and follow it from there, okay? I can see what's going on in Benghazi. Okay? It's been several months since Benghazi happened. Anybody who wanted to talk about the fog of war and let's let things shake down and settle out a little bit before we start hammering anybody has had plenty of time to investigate even just what is publicly available, not even what is classified. And these senators and House members on the committees are not asking the most basic questions that are perfectly obvious to me and to us, and they have access to more information. And why don't they want to know? Why aren't they going after the information? Is the Muslim Brotherhood in everybody's office, or does nobody care about national security anymore?
No, I'm sure that these congressional members care very much about national security and consider, the 4 American lives lost in Benghazi a terrible tragedy. We all do. But they are not well informed. I don't know how else to put it. They just simply aren't well informed. They're too busy, maybe, to take the time to do even as much research as you've done, CJ.
Yeah.
They just haven't done it. I've heard several members today still referring to Benghazi as a consulate, for instance.
The cables.
It's not a consulate. It never was a consulate, at least since the 60s or something.
Yeah.
It was a base of operations. It was a mission. And the only person I heard actually asking about the purpose of Benghazi, what was it there for, was Senator Rand Paul so far. Now, I did miss some of the questions, and I wasn't there the entire time watching. But of those I heard, his was the only question about that. And he directly asked Secretary of State Clinton, was the mission at Benghazi involved in collecting, buying, shipping weapons
Right.
from Libya to Turkey?
Right.
And it was at this point that the secretary completely lost her cool, and I think it was very revealing
Very
that it was
telling
on
to
this
tell.
question she
Yeah.
lost it. And she said, Turkey?
Turkey?
Like,
Oh, no, we don't know anything about Turkey.
Oh,
Why would
where is
women
that?
be going to Turkey?
Where is
Well,
that?
there's this little
Gobble,
thing
gobble?
called a presidential intelligence finding, which, thanks to the media, has been revealed. And that intelligence finding was to provide United States government full support to the Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood affiliated rebels fighting against the Syrian regime of Bashar al-Assad. And Turkey is backing the rebels. And Turkey is the place where the weapons and the jihadis come and ship through on their way to the border with Syria across to the rebels. And Secretary of State Clinton just doesn't know anything about it
Turkey,
at
where's
all.
Turkey? Where's Turkey at? Oh, Turkey, is that a country? I don't know,
It's
never
very
heard of that.
telling, that's the question she lost it on.
It's just, are we is the American press that stupid? Or are they compliant in all this? Or is
No, they're complicit. They're completely
They're
in the bag on
complicit.
it.
Yeah, they're complete. And clearly the American people don't care about it too much either, because if they did, they never would have voted for Obama and his policies in November.
Yeah,
Why did this bring down an administration?
The campaign was never about this. There was a moment after the Benghazi attack occurred when I think, the Republican challenger, Mitt Romney, really could have taken this to the
He blew
Obama
it.
administration, to the president,
Yeah.
and really put some stiff questions to him. And in the last debate, which
Yeah.
was a debate on foreign affairs issues,
Yep.
absolutely declined to do so.
Yeah, and we
no
were there.
clue why he wouldn't, but that was the moment, and he let it go by.
Yeah.
And the majority of this campaign, this past campaign, was really about the economy,
Yeah.
about financial issues, which perfectly understandable for a lot of Americans. That's the biggest reality in their lives right now, is how to make ends meet. Perfectly understandable. That's what they focus on.
Right.
And one of those
But if you're the presidential candidate, maybe you need to talk about a few more things too.
Yeah, well, and then that's once again, that's where those tentacles go that we're talking about earlier. I mean, you go down to people like Grover Norquist and things like that, and he's just advising Romney, and he's getting his 2 cents in, and everybody else around them, and it's just so insidious how this is all interplayed into both sides of the politics.
You know what else? You know what I noticed? Did you see what Hillary is wearing today?
Green?
Green with black poking out of the sleeves and around her neck.
Yeah, I did. I absolutely did.
Okay.
Oh, I
That's
missed
a very
that.
good point to make.
I missed that.
Yeah, she is totally wearing the Islamic green and black today,
She's
man.
wearing the colors of the
Yeah.
Islamic Jihad movement.
Yeah.
Yes, she is. That's
Well-
not a mistake.
No, I didn't think so.
I think at one time, Huma was her
Fashion coordinator.
her wardrobe advisor
Yeah.
as well while they were on the campaign trail when Secretary Clinton was running for the Senate
For the Senate, yeah.
twice in
Yeah.
what was it, 2000 and 2006,
Yeah.
and that was one of Huma Abedin's tasks to.
Yeah, because did you
advice around
see?
wardrobe,
Yeah, after
so-
Benghazi.
that is so in your face.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
I
that
did
jumped
notice
out
that.
at me right away.
Well, I
I
did
have
catch
to
it.
tell you.
You
You
know-
know, I guess you have to be a girl to look at that or something.
Well, if I had a guy, it doesn't even faze me. But I'm just saying.
I
But
don't
now-
watch
but you bring
the
it up.
awards shows for the awards. I just like to see what everybody's wearing. But
But when you bring it up, someone she doesn't dress herself a lot of times.
No, of
And
course not.
They just come and they put it on the hook. Here
so
you go.
remember when she was in Morocco right
Right.
after Benghazi, and she's
Right.
wearing, she's wearing her powder blue Islamic, long pantsuit, long coated
Yeah.
suit.
Okay.
That she wears the powder blue
Well,
when
you
she
know,
goes to the
that's maybe
palaces.
not quite so bad. Kind of,
But
No,
then
but I look for things like that with her because there's fashion patterns to what she does depending on who she's meeting with that are very sometimes they're more subtle than others.
and when
but
she doesn't wear makeup when she
today's
goes
not
to the Middle
subtle.
East.
Yeah.
And when she,
today's not subtle at all.
No, it was totally in the face. Like, okay, it's like saying, you know what? I'm untouchable. You can't touch me. I'm with them and they got my back.
Yeah. And who's the them?
Who is the them?
them
It's the
are
Muslim
forces
Brotherhood.
of Islamic Jihad,
Yeah.
which have sworn our United States of America's destruction,
Yeah.
and that of Israel besides.
We
our
now
ally.
face a spreading jihadist threat, and I'm on their side.
Absolutely. That's what she's saying.
Wake up, everybody.
McFly. That's what it kind of feels like. You're just like, this is just so, crazy. It's like, all right, this is so crazy and insane. It has to be false because
You just think, when am I going to wake up from this nightmare? I've fallen down the rabbit hole, and
Yeah.
how do I get back out again?
Yeah.
and
How do we get back out again? Can we?
right.
Can you recover?
Yes, we can.
How
Yes, of
does
course we
this
can.
turn around?
But the first thing is we have to recognize, that we have fallen down the rabbit hole, and then start climbing instead of keeping on digging.
Well, yeah, I just don't see it getting better before it gets worse, in my opinion. I just do not see it. I just see us going further and further down a rabbit hole. I don't see a turnaround. I don't see anything out there that says, other than
Well,
what we're doing is any semblance of, especially
yeah, I mean,
on
at the moment you're right. Tunisia's fallen to the Brotherhood. Libya has fallen to Al Qaeda and the Brotherhood. Egypt has fallen to the Brotherhood, and they're now officially threatening genocide against the Jewish state of Israel. There was that video, from 2010 that was shown on Memory, the Middle East Media Research
Right.
Institute. So invaluable, by the way,
Yeah.
for translations of these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Showing that 2010 speech by Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi, referring to Jews as apes and pigs, which of course comes straight out of the Quran,
Right.
Right.
and threatening genocide, as the Muslim Brotherhood has always stood for in terms of Israel and the Jews. And we are not in any way pulling back support. I think there was a statement of, condemnation of that remark.
It wasn't.
As though it were issued
yeah.
in isolation, as though it's not just merely the latest in hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of such statements by Mohammed Morsi, by the Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, Mohammed Badia, by the top other members of the Muslim Brotherhood, like Hayat al-Shatter, who was at one point a presidential candidate and is the deputy Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood. All these people. I mean, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the supreme, or I should say maybe the senior jurist, that is the Islamic legal jurist of the Muslim Brotherhood. All of them have made these kinds of anti-Semitic genocidal statements. Not a word of protest. And instead, what? We're going to send the Muslim Brotherhood.
We're going to send them some 20 F-16s.
And F-16s. What, pray tell, does the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood need top-of-the-line U.S. tanks and F-16s for? Brigands in the Sinai Peninsula? Probably not. An invasion from Libya? Not this year.
Not so much.
No.
Sudan, their ally in Islam.
Right.
Who? What are those weapons for?
I think you get into the eye.
Against whom are they most likely to be used?
Against Israel.
Against whom has Egypt ever gone to war in the recent past decades?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do they need them for? Exactly. That's a great question. Why do they need these weapons? Who is actually, what outside, look at the contours, what outside threat is actually threatening Egypt from toppling?
Exactly. Right. And they have internal threats. They have internal security threats.
You don't need planes for that.
You don't understand that.
No.
You don't use F-16s for smugglers and brigands, tribal uprisings in the Sinai. Libya is not going to invade Egypt anytime soon. Who else is on their borders? Sudan is on their borders. Sudan is certainly not an enemy. It's an ally. It's a fellow member of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, as you mentioned before there, Mark, OIC.
Okay.
That's it.
What does Egypt need tanks and planes for?
Has Israel been making an aggressive posturing towards Egypt lately?
Israel's existence is an aggressive posture in and of itself.
There you go.
That's the whole point. Its existence.
And then what did the Mohammed Morsi just say recently in our little video? We played the Sharia video.
That's what Claire's talking about.
Yep. Islam, martyrdom is our goal. Jihad is our way.
Yeah.
I mean,
dying in the way of Allah is our highest aspiration.
That's right.
It's never changed.
That's our ally.
That is the motto of the Brotherhood.
That's our ally.
The secular, largely, secular Brotherhood.
Oh yeah. The right.
Illustrious D&I.
Well, actually, the Brotherhood that wants to institute democratic principles.
That's right. Because Sharia is such a democratic form of government.
That's right.
Well, I mean,
this is the democratic
use of democracy, or maybe we should say the use of the mechanisms of democracy, such as voting and elections, in order to institute Sharia, which is utterly antithetical to the philosophy, the full understanding of democracy as a system, as a method of civil society as we understand it, not just a ballot box.
In Hillary's testimony earlier today, she referred to the emerging democracies of North Africa and the Middle East.
I was trying to think which ones those might be.
I couldn't think of who they would
came up
be.
short. I had a bit of trouble there.
Are you able to stay over for a little bit into the next hour and talk a little bit more about these Benghazi hearings?
And we can talk about all of and what I want you to pull up, Claire, is all of Hillary Clinton's accomplishments as Secretary of State.
We couldn't think of what those were either.
We thought you being the brain that you are, you could actually find them.
We asked our listeners to
how much time do I get? What'd you say, 2 minutes? That should probably be okay.
We asked our listeners to phone in if they could if they could name one of Hillary Clinton's foreign policy achievements as Secretary of State, and we haven't had any calls in 2 hours.
I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. We are Trento Vision on WNN 1470 AM. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back.